Friday night, before the launch of Supermassive, the fact that we get to get together and talk about Supermassive 2023, I'm utterly excited. Thank you all for making time. And obviously, we've had discussions in the past about your various series, but the celebration that is Supermassive 2023 can't come soon enough for the readers. So, without further ado, I say we just jump right in, and we'll have some fun with it. So, I guess the big question for all of you, and feel free, anyone can jump in with this one, is last year with the launch of Supermassive 2022, you were really Radiant Black into all of your respective series, and now you're in the midst of some major developments with your respective characters and story arcs. Maybe just the process of juggling all of those different elements to get to this pivotal moment. So whoever really wants to dive into that, what was the dynamic like of building to this spot?
Complicated, frantic. I think we've been working on this for, it must be pretty close to a year now. And because of the sort of like ever shifting and changing nature of our series and the status quo is involved, the nature of what this was changed that whole time as well. And up to a couple of months ago, there was smaller detail shifting. And I think finding the right way to integrate all of the characters into where they were in this moment in a way that could be satisfying, but still reflective of where they're at was difficult. But I think the construct that we came up with really helped us out with that. And I think once we landed on that, everything else sort of started to fall together.
I truly don't think we would have been able to get it done without Michael and Matt, because they really took charge of wrangling everybody, I think, in a very, very feasible way, in that we all knew exactly what we had to do, and they gave us the time to do it. But really, they carried me, I will say. So
I think, everybody else has their monthly books, and that is an ordeal unto itself. And not that Matt doesn't have his own other work, but with Inferno Girl Red as sort of a mini series that was wrapped, was able to step in and do a little bit of the more sort of structural lifting. And then my job is just sort of pointing people at stuff and being I just need this. Just these are your 10 pages. Give me a draft on them, and then we'll, the real trick is that it's a lot of okay, here it is. Now let's do a rewrite pass. Everybody find your character throughout the whole book, track their arc. Does it work? It's you just keep working it until it's done. The trick is that you just have to do a lot of work.
I think the thing that made this one more challenging than last year is that whereas last year we were introducing characters for the first time, this year we want it to be accessible for people to read cold if they're brand new to this, but at the same time we want to reflect the current status quos of the characters, and those status quos are a little complicated. And so just finding our way into everyone's status quo, and then as Matt said, once we had the framework, we very quickly found the way that the framework could allow for us to tell arcs for most everyone through this, quest, and they would be additive to what the main series is doing, and that's always the goal for these things. So it took a little longer to find it, but we did.
Yeah, I was a jerk on this one. Because we were writing it so early, it meant you had to commit to things that you hadn't written yet. Are we spoiling things on this podcast, or are we talking?
You want to? It's really up to you guys as far as the conversation goes. I can
Okay.
hold this until after the issue comes out. I would rather it be an organic conversation, so your discretion.
Cool. Yeah, I hadn't written the Caleb character so I was writing Caleb in Supermassive before introducing him in the actual book, which was an odd way to the backwards way of doing it, and just also just having to finally commit to what I was going to do with the end of my arc so early on was something that just goes against every part of fiber of my being when it comes to procrastination and giving myself as many outs as possible.
Well, it's interesting because when we first were talking about Rogue Sun, Ryan, I'm directing it back at you, Phil. You were talking about how you were building to your book by introducing Dylan's father, in the role for Marcus. So now writing Caleb in this capacity sort of has an interesting duality to it.
Yeah, like it was funny because I think we came up with what we wanted to do with the end of Rogue Sun at the farmers market. Matt and Michael, you guys, we all sat in the farmers market and got food, and I was like, this is kind of what I'm thinking. And you guys were like, yeah, try this and this and this, and I was like, well, that was helpful. So I don't even think Rogue Sun would have been finished without you guys. So thank you. So it was a nice sort of organic thing to be actually go into this with you guys, because since you guys were sort of instrumental in helping me figure out the end of the first volume too. It was interesting to be able to go into this and actually play with, the dynamic in this is very different, obviously, with Caleb now sort of controlling Dylan's body. And so as we talked about this, Dylan still has not met any of the other characters in it's after 2 crossovers. I think we should just keep figuring out ways for them never to actually meet, just like they bring a puppet in or something. I don't know. We'll just keep playing with different things. But yeah, what you said is interesting about the duality. It was like in the first volume of Rogue Sun, it was Dylan is learning how to be a hero with his dad next to him. Now in this one, Caleb is now a hero, and now Dylan's getting to stand on the outside and sort of look in. And I thought that was like a fun. Those are always fun characters to write too, because they just get to be smartasses and just stand right there and watch everything that's happening.
The other piece that I've enjoyed seeing with all of your books is that you're building the universe slowly. I know you made a concerted effort to make each of your series independent of each other, but still coming together for the this once a year celebration. But Rogue Sun, kicking off this book into the rest of the story, has a lot of history that we already are aware of from Volume 2, specifically with Caleb's introduction. But seeing the universe expand from a time perspective, that these characters have existed in some capacity for a longer period of time than just when Radiant Black kicks off the Massiverse. So I guess more of the time elements, how does that play in for each of you, or when you were thinking about how your characters were going to be stepping into Supermassive 23?
We said we're doing spoilers, right? That's what. Yep. Cool. Okay. So I think one of the fun things about doing a Supermassive is that we all have our own, in their own right, like rich and textured worlds. And I think we've all put a lot of thought into the histories of these characters in the world and their sort of own internal mythology. And the delight of it is coming together and sort of like cracking a central idea and then discovering all of the pieces from each one that we can pull together. And I know in my case, there was a lot of stuff that I knew about the world and history of Inferno Girl Red that hadn't made it into book 1 and I had like planned for going forward. But when we're having these conversations, I was like, well, I can grab that, I can grab that, I can grab that. And that all fits organically here. And I know I'm not going to be compromising anything going forward because it's all stuff that I had built for Inferno Girl Red sort of moving forward anyway. And I think that's the process that makes Supermassive great all around, is we all have these individual pieces that we're really passionate about, and then you throw them together and they start sparking off each other and you get these interactions and unique relationships that really make it sing.
Yeah, I mean, I think as much as Ryan likes to say he was a jerk, he really wasn't. I mean, I think we have we all are very passionate about our worlds and our characters, but the whole point of Supermassive and the reason why we're doing this whole thing with Kyle is that we all like each other and that we're all friends, and so there's a willingness to work together and live in the same space and adjust it. So I think, I mean, for my case, like I adjusted BB's storyline so that it would fit where we needed it to for Supermassive, and ultimately it made the book better. It made that first volume really powerful and set her up in a really cool way, but that wouldn't have happened without Supermassive because we needed her to be in a certain place at Supermassive, and so I made sure that she was, and everybody kind of had that kind of similar journeys, but we also have to take care of our own books. So I honestly think the way it came together was very cool, but it was really just everybody being flexible and also everybody deciding what they wanted the book to be.
Yeah, that's actually something, thinking about it, that's something that I like that's something I remember really kind of taking away from my experience doing the Bat books during the New 52. You know, I was writing Nightwing, and at the same time Scott Snyder was writing the main Batman book and had plans for Dick Grayson, tying him to the Court of Owls, which was like a cornerstone of Scott's kind of reimagining of Batman for the new 52. And so it was like this dilemma where you're trying to make a book stand on its own, but you also know you're going to be pulled into crossovers like all the time. And in our case, we don't have that. We're only crossing over like once a year, right? But what I found worked really well was when I knew like a crossover, like Death of the Family was coming, for example, I actually built Dick Grayson's arc towards where I knew the crossover was going to be. And so then the crossover event ended up being the kind of like culmination of his arc thematically, while still playing into the event that, you know, we had to do. And so that's something like, that's kind of the mindset I take into all of these, so that like, if we can't find it, then we'll find a different version, which is actually what happened on this one. And so finding the construct and the quest construct is not only us riffing on genre and doing, you know, we want to play in different genres in these specials, but also as a way to build the, you know, build versions of the characters where they're at right now, in a way that everyone was comfortable with and able to do.
And jumping onto that, I want to go back to Melissa for a second. You know, BB got introduced at the end of the first Supermassive, you know, with a wonderful, you know, teaser and setup. What was it like as far as the dynamics of letting her play with the boys for the outing?
It was a little terrifying, honestly. Not for any other reason other than, you know, this is the second time out, and I think there's a lot of expectation on BB. But thankfully, you know, I know these guys pretty well. I've worked with them quite a bit, and I like them all. I think they're all pretty cool. So it was hugely an honor for me, because I'm truly every time I'm in a room with them or I see them work, and this is, you know, years I'm truly humbled by the sheer genius that each one of them have. They're all so freaking smart and so good with character and story in so many different ways. And I feel like most of the times I'm just sitting there soaking it in, and then like, oh, I have to write. It's my turn. Okay, let me try. So there's a little bit of imposter syndrome once in a while, because I know I'm probably the newest at this, but it was lovely. I mean, I everybody was fully committed to embracing BB and bringing her into the fold and having her be an important part of the story, and I really appreciated that. And I was just happy to be in the sandbox and be able to play, truly.
I feel like Melissa is talking herself down a little bit there. Like, she's been involved in us making stories, I mean, Kyle and Ryan in particular, for years, and a big contributing force for a long time. And I've gotten to do a little less than that because our Ranger tenures didn't like really overlap in that way. But I'm very excited to be able to have done so now. And yeah, Melissa's incredible and has more than earned the right to sort of mix it up with all of us. And I think it's a real room of equals in terms of who gets to have a say on things and who's guiding things. We all just want to make the best book.
I appreciate that.
Also-
It feels different though when you're like, versus when you're giving notes on somebody else on behalf of a brand, as opposed to when you're like letting your soul out. on
Sure,
your own.
yeah.
But I appreciate that.
You solved many a problem in my stories in ways that I can't tell because I've already taken credit for them. So I'm sorry.
Kyle, you were going to hold something up?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, and also just to say it printed beautifully.
Oh yeah.
Like it's a pretty stunning edition, this here crossover special. So I think readers are in for a fun one. You can put this on your shelf in between the trade paperbacks for the Massiverse.
I feel like I've got the full collection behind me on display.
Oh, there
so
you go. I see some of those.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah, yeah.
I'd actually love to defer to Michael as long as he's not dying on screen. I know that a lot of the design as far as the art and logistics, you've had your hands in. Can you talk about just more of, maybe some of your personal highlights from the recent trade paperbacks that have been coming out in the collections, or just, the aspects, there's so many pieces of this that I know, take time and energy to put together, but, I'd love to hear some of your more recent personal highlights.
Yeah, I think the Rogue Sun Volume 2 trade just came out as we're recording this. I had a look at my copy. Every time we say we're going to do spot gloss for the cover, and then I look at this thing that Abel's drawn, and it's like, well, there goes 4 hours of my day painting around the edges of some fire. But every time then you get the book in your hand, and it's like, yeah, that it was worth the time. Absolutely. I think we haven't got our hands on the Inferno Girl Red trade yet. That should be very soon. I think that's a really slick looking book. We took a bunch of the stuff that For the People designed for the hardcover, adapted it down into the trade. I think it looks really good. I'm really excited for people to see that. The Dead Lucky honestly, I'm really happy with where all of our trades are at the moment. Where I as we're going forward, I keep looking for stuff to maybe we do a little update, do we do a little tweak, but I think we're doing some cool stuff. I like everything. I know that's a boring answer, but if we didn't like it, we wouldn't be printing it and releasing it to you. So I like all of it.
The Massiverse collection is definitely dominating a shelf in my living room, but we're very happy to keep adding to it. I want to go to Kyle for a minute. It's interesting that Marshall is the crossover veteran of Supermassive. Obviously, Caleb has more history that we're starting to explore, but I wouldn't have expected Marshall to be the one to have at least that experience in conjunction with the team. And can you talk about bringing Nathan into Supermassive if he wasn't available at the moment for the first one?
Well, he actually was in Supermassive. He was in the movie theater lamenting that Marshall was getting the call to go do something probably super cool, which then he did. So that, in hindsight, I should have, Michael, we should have made a reference to that in this one. But no, I think honestly, the trickiest part about it was nailing down. I wanted to make sure that the status quo and the tone would work okay with where I was going to end up leaving things in Radiant Black 24. And I just wasn't able to firm up Radiant Black 24 until a little bit later. But once I then was able to do some adjustments for dialogue in the early introduction of Nathan and Marshall, it slotted really, really well for me. But so much of it about introducing Nathan is really about introducing the dilemma that they have in this moment, which is that they have this colossal choice they have to make coming up. And what is that going to mean? The idea that in the inner term, they can go on this seemingly unrelated kind of adventure and maybe gain a different perspective on their own dilemma by the end of it is that's really nice. I like that we're able to do that. But as far as getting into character stuff, I don't know how Nathan feels about Wellness Wallace by the end here, but I can't imagine that he is too fond of him. So he did grow a little bit.
Since we are talking about spoilers, I have to ask who slipped in the Generations reference. Who gets the credit?
That's me. I think that like it felt right in the moment as a reference, but I also feel like on a reread, it's a nice kind of like foreshadowing for the end of the issue. With Marshall being, well, I hope this crossover doesn't have a super depressing ending. Is sort of my way of gently trying to be like, this may be a downer, guys, strap in.
We
Well,
did have to cut 2 or 3 Indiana Jones jokes because I think basically everyone wrote one into their pages, and we just had to go like, okay, let's find the best one and you can have that, but you cannot all do it.
There's 2 that made it in.
Yeah.
I think we couldn't. Yeah, I think maybe we cut 2 more.
Yeah.
Yeah, we did.
Do you remember what the other ones might have been?
Oh God. No, they were all like, no shade to these 4 wonderful writers. They were all very much along similar lines. It was like everyone was doing the same sort of riff, and so we just cut some doubles.
Yeah.
Big twist. There's a big reveal for Matt. How did that impact your plans for Inferno Girl Red, or was that something that came about organically while crafting the story?
Yeah, it actually doesn't impact Inferno Girl Red at all, only because it sort of loosely was the plan for Inferno Girl Red anyway. If the Supermassives didn't exist, we were already working on this sort of like larger Inferno Girl Red mythology, and the idea that the dragon bracelet is multiversal and has existed for eons and travels where it's needed, and also the idea that you can't use it forever. At a certain point, it's too much for the body to take, and you kind of have to let it go. That's something that has been built into it from scratch in the early plans, so that when we were discussing the Supermassive and the idea of like traveling to the past, we just had these pieces that were just there and ready to go. And even down to the idea that you have to be able to let this thing go at some point just fell right into place thematically with everything else that we're discussing and everything else that the other characters happened to be going through at the time. It was, surprisingly and very fortunately organic and fitting. We didn't have to change any plans on the Inferno Girl Red front, thankfully.
Follow-up question: how does she know Spawn?
I know the answer to that question, but I'm not sure we're ready to share that, because I think like she knows Spawn and she knows Rogue Sun. Ergo, Rogue Sun knows Spawn, right? So
wait, that's not true.
They had a cover
together. He said it. It's true.
Yeah, they're on the cover together.
They're
you
on
don't
a
be on a cover
cover
together if you
together.
know each other.
Yeah.
By the Kevin Bacon thing, like the 6 degrees of separation, they're like besties.
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that Kevin Bacon knows every actor.
Kevin Bacon knows Spawn, and Kevin Bacon knows Night Sun or Rogue
Kevin
Sun.
Bacon is Spawn.
I think you're forgetting, Michael, that we choose how things go here. So when we say
sorry, I want to be clear. My problem is with the logical inference you've drawn, not the fact you've drawn with it.
Okay, well, yeah, focus on the fact, if not the inference. Then
I mean, we could just have a Supermassive next year that is Spawn, medieval Spawn. We could go with
Look, we don't need more writers. That's just kidding.
I'm going to stay out of it now. No, but you set up a beautiful shared universe with that inclusion as well. What was the approval process like for that one shot? Because I think it's really interesting that you added that nuance.
I met Todd at San Diego last year on the show floor with Matt, actually, and said hi, and we talked briefly, and then I told him I mentioned that we were doing this with the intention that I would like follow up when the time was right, and so I did, and I wanted to wait until we had most of the book done so we could show him like, hey, this is gonna be cool, and I knew he was a fan of Daniele's art, so I reached out, and he gave us the thumbs up, and then his editor in chief, blanking on his name, I think it's Thomas, hooked us up with the medieval Spawn font to use on the page as well. So it's official.
Yeah, I think it's worth saying just how incredibly and immediately generous Todd was with all of this stuff. He was just like, yeah, sounds awesome. Let's do it. And that was kind of it, right?
Yep.
Is that at New York Comic Con when he was walking through the line? And so he comes walking down the line, and I see him. And if you've ever watched Todd at a comic convention, he can't move longer for than like 5 feet before getting talk to somebody else. And I saw him coming up, and I told Kyle, I was like, Kyle, don't introduce me. I don't want to meet him. And Kyle's like, sure. And then Todd walks over and was like, hey, Todd, this is my friend Ryan. And then I was like, oh, hey, man, and shake his hand. And then 5 seconds after, he was like, oh, dude, thanks so much for introducing me. I lost it. It was like shaking Todd. I mean, like I love, like, there was a really, I hadn't talked about this, like, but like having Medieval Spawn in the back of this was a really big deal for me. Like, I really loved that run. I remember buying that first issue, and I remember it was the Neil Gaiman issue that you know, the one that started to bring in a lot of the mythology in that series came from. I think it's like 7, maybe, or maybe it's later on. And I love the Medieval Spawn. One of my favorite comic books ever is the one where it's the Violator against the Medieval Spawn, where Violator is telling the story in voiceover, but it does not match the imagery because he's just telling a lie. And I was like, that was really, really cool. And so there was stuff that happened in that book that I thought was such a big part of why I like Image. So to have him be in our crossover is just like crazy, full circle, amazing.
My last big question to all of you would just be more favorite panel or favorite sequence from the book, you know, from an art perspective.
Oh, that's a good question. I think for me, I actually I really like the page where Marshall is riding on Nathan's back, and that was a Daniele idea. This one here. But I also love it from an art standpoint because Walter loves, and I forgot about this, but he told me about this when we were doing Power Rangers. He loves painting skies. So he went insane in this book. Every time the sky, it's got like 50 cuts in it. And he's basically doing like this intense anime look for everything that is super cool and different and fits with what Daniele's doing really well. The whole thing just looks really unique, but that page in particular is a standout for me.
My one, probably pretty obvious. It's when Thomasin as Inferno Girl Red takes out the dragon. It was something that, because it's really just like one moment, like Thomasin as Inferno Girl Red gets this one moment in the book, and I think the sort of like more conservative take would be like, oh, we need a few more panels, we need to show a bit more action. But we had faith that Daniele would just give us like one image that would hit you so hard that would do so much more than a bunch of smaller panels would. And he absolutely came through. It's just, it's a testament to how powerful his art is. It's just like one big splash and you get it all from that.
This one's my favorite. It's Phoebe. I just think that's the coolest. She looks so cool. Like,
So cool. Yeah.
I have never looked this cool in my entire life. And I just was like, and it's funny because it's like the way the book opens, it keeps opening to that page. And I'm like, this looks cool. It's just, I don't know. I know it's not like a massive, but it's just like, she just looks awesome. And I was like, yeah, love it.
Hell yeah.
I really liked the conversation between BB and Thomasin. I thought the expressions were really good. And like, it's such a quiet moment in like such a bombastic, crazy book. And I appreciate those little moments where you actually see like the sincerity and like a real conversation. And so I just thought like you nailed the expressions, and there's a little bit of flirtiness, but a little bit of sincerity and a little bit of tragedy because you know there's no time for any of this. And so they kind of just have to move on, and like it's just done in 6 panels. And I thought it was cool.
Yeah, speaking of the page Matt picked, the page after that where like Thomasin lands, the Grail falls to the ground, she's collapsed, the others approach. It's like, it's just 3 perfect panels. There is no need for us to add any dialogue to any of this.
Well, in sound effects, so Matt and I are definitely bigger sound effects people than Michael is. And normally, big explosion, like I'm gonna do some sort of in the massive verse, like I would do like a big cocoon or something like that. And in this, like the sequence just felt right with nothing except for the clank of the glass, and it just feels like a slow motion, this dope sequence from something animated.
Any favorite alternate covers?
Oh,
So many. Just
the Goni Montes one is a lot of fun. It's very different from anything he's done for us or with us before.
Yeah, I mean, then there's one other cover, which is we did it. And a retailer variant. Sorry, that Ryan's holding up, bewildered because I forgot about it. Like we did it last time. We had a jam cover from everyone, and it was so much fun and so delightful. It felt right to do it again. And we had a brief conversation about like, can we get Erica to work on it? We're saying Inferno Girl Red's not in the book, but
saying Cassie's not in the book.
Sorry, we're saying Cassie is not in the book, but we can't. But Erica, we all love Erica. Like we can't leave Erica. So Erica drew this like gorgeous castle with Inferno Girl Red just sort of sitting on a corner, like watching everyone else have fun. And then the others all came in and drew like really great. And then I think Igor Monti came in, didn't color the whole book, but colored that cover, did like 3 different options and offered them all to us. I really love that B cover.
Well, I feel like that's a perfect note to wrap on. Guys, thank you so much. Always a pleasure. Excited for Supermassive 23 to come out this coming week. Stay tuned for more exclusive coverage of the Massiverse and all the respective titles of ComicsOnline. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Matt.
Awesome.